Ranking Member. Acting Attorney General Blanche, thank you for your service and for appearing here. And thank you to your family and to the men and women of the Department of Justice who work tirelessly to fight crime and to make our nation secure. I'm grateful for their service. I'm sorry that your schedule apparently didn't permit us to meet before this confirmation hearing, but I hope and expect we'll find time to meet soon after today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. As I consider your nomination, like all other nominations to similar cabinet positions, I need to know you're qualified to serve. You demonstrably are. That you have the policy views to serve well. We will discuss that today. And most importantly, in this role, that you have the independence to serve as the Attorney General for the American people. And that last question has troubled me the most. You're in charge of a Department of Justice I don't recognize, prosecuting the president's political enemies, firing rank-and-file prosecutors and FBI agents because of the cases they were assigned to, slashing grants for law enforcement and public safety. These are some actions that in your previous confirmation hearing before us, you said you would not take. Now, I appreciate your statement walking back the $1.8 billion weaponization fund that you created, but I question how it got that far, and we'll get into that. You sat in appropriations hearing earlier this year before me and defended it at that time. In fact, if I remember correctly, you told me I was wrong for criticizing it. But following questions by Senators Durbin and Cornyn, I'm concerned it's not dead yet, and I think we should talk that through. Overall, this is not what I believe the American people expect or deserve from the Department of Justice. Having spent critical parts of January 6th in this room, taking shelter from the mob, I just wanted to open with some questions. How many people were convicted of assaulting law enforcement officers on January 6th?
I believe around 120 approximately, but I could be off a few more.
You are. The answer is more than 200. And how many of those individuals had their sentences commuted or were pardoned by President Trump?
President Trump either commuted or pardoned every defendant from the January 6 events.
That's correct. And in this room right now and outside this room are Capitol Police officers protecting us in this hearing room. How many of them do you think might have friends or colleagues who were attacked by supporters of the president on January 6th?
I don't know the numbers, but I'm sure many of the Capitol Police officers who are here today were working on January 6th or knew people who were.
I'll just say that I consider it a shameful slap in the face of the men and women of law enforcement for those convicted of assaulting police officers to have been pardoned. I know you were not serving as Deputy Attorney General when President Trump pardoned those folks, but you said just a few moments ago that you were not celebrating this decision by the president. He was exercising his constitutional power. But earlier this year in front of CPAC, a conservative event, I would say from the transcript, you actually trumpeted it as an achievement. And I quote, saying, if you look at what happened to the men and women convicted because of January 6th, by 5 p.m. on January 20th, every one of them was either pardoned or had their sentence commuted by President Trump. So when folks say you've done nothing, I say you have a very short memory. Would you say that you're
practicing there at all, Senator? So I was responding to inquiries around why more hadn't been done by the Department of Justice with respect to January 6 defendants. And so my answer was that January 6 defendants and some of their lawyers had a short memory because a lot had already been done. Indeed, by the end of the day on January 20th, they had all been pardoned or commuted. So I wasn't celebrating it. I was merely stating a fact, which is that the January 6 defendants did receive a very generous pardon or commutation from President Trump, every one of them on January 20th.
A generous, and in my view, for those who had assaulted police officers, unwarranted, unjustified, ahistorical, and a terrible precedent. Let me move on to questions I've asked in previous hearings. Is President Trump, just as a simple matter of constitutional law, eligible to run for another term as president in 2028?
I don't believe he is, no.
That is a correct, in my view, reading of the plain language of the 22nd Amendment. Why do you think several of the judicial nominees of this administration have refused repeatedly to answer that question simply and clearly as you just did when I put it to them?
I have no idea why they answer questions the way
Me neither.
I mean, you're asking me to speculate about something. I don't know.
Is the Department of Justice that you are running independent from the White House?
The Department of Justice, like every single department in the executive is part of the executive. I mean, Article 2 of the Constitution gives the power of the executive to President Trump. So we certainly operate with integrity. We certainly operate in the single mindset to serve the American people and do the right thing. But I am a member, if confirmed. I will be a member of the cabinet. I'm serving in the acting capacity that way now, just like the other cabinet members. And President Trump can fire me whenever he wants. So,
do you have a sense why he fired your predecessor?
I have no idea. I mean, President Trump, we all serve at the pleasure of President Trump and this administration.
Did President Trump ever post on Truth Social directing your predecessor to get at it, to prosecute his perceived political enemies?
I don't think those were his exact words. But
those were not his exact words,
no,
but clearly that was the intention. It is my impression, sir, that you are here rather than your predecessor because the president was unhappy with her failures to actually secure convictions of folks like Attorney General Tish James or former FBI Director Jim Comey. If you're confirmed and you're asked to take an action you believe to be illegal or unethical, would you resign?
That will never happen, but yes, if it were to happen, I'm not going to violate my oath to the Constitution.
I appreciate that answer. You did answer a question by a colleague about input that you gave to the president. Did you ever say no to the president on the slush fund, the anti-weaponization fund? Did you advise him against this?
Will not talk about communications I have with the president. I served as his lawyer for a couple of years before he was elected. I'm the Deputy Attorney General and the Acting Attorney General, so I'm not going to talk about communications that I have with him. But Senator, I will say that President Trump trusts me to give him counsel. Counsel does not mean yes, man, and so that's true in my case, like it should be in any Attorney General's case.
So let me just for a minute bear down on the anti-weaponization fund. You've testified to the House we are not moving forward with that fund, period. But you've repeatedly refused to put that commitment in writing or to submit a declaration to the court. You're an officer of the court, a member of the bar. You should be able to make that assertion in a court filing or even in a letter submitted to this body. On May 19th, you testified before the Justice Appropriations Subcommittee. Since the case had been dismissed, there was no judge and no mechanism for judicial review. But in an opinion this week, a federal judge wrote, and I'm quoting, that your testimony was at best misleading and at worst disingenuous, explaining the court remained available to review this agreement had you sought relief. Why not seek review of the settlement agreement or submit some record, some writing, given that the president continues to publicly champion this weaponization fund, and given your previous answer to me in another hearing that you wouldn't say whether or not those who assaulted cops on January 6th would be eligible for multi-million-dollar payouts? So
there's a lot of questions there. First of all, we have put it in writing. It's in repeated court filings in EDVA and DC. So this narrative that you won't put it in writing happens not to be true. The reason why neither myself nor Secretary Bessent agreed to put a declaration in is because there's long-standing precedent that judges cannot ask cabinet secretaries or people like me to put in declarations. It has nothing to do with whether the fund is alive. I'm under oath today, and I've said it's dead repeatedly. I said it to the House Oversight Committee, and I'm happy to say it as many times as necessary. As far as what the judge said in Florida, just the last question you asked about Florida, that judge disagreed with what I said. I still believe that 11th Circuit precedent, which I've studied, I am right. So we'll see.
Thank you. You did say earlier, this is the most transparent Department of Justice in American history. We have nothing to hide, and you started by saying we're here to rebuild trust. Two decisions or two OLC opinions I'm very interested in. I'm the senior Democrat on Defense and Intelligence Approach. I'm the most senior member of the Foreign Relations Committee on my side, who's currently serving on this committee. I'm curious as to why the most transparent department has refused to release the OLC opinion that justifies the 66 strikes the military has conducted on boats in the Caribbean, which have killed more than 220 people, either a redacted version or in a classified setting to me and others who are in relevant decision-making positions.
Well, Senator, we made the head of OLC available on multiple occasions to explain that to you and other members of the committee. And that is extraordinarily transparent and unprecedented that we've done that. Whether an OLC opinion is released, there's a lot of process that goes into that. But the idea that we were not transparent about our legal basis there is absolutely not true.
Okay. Another chance to be transparent. The FISA court in March certified your Section 702 proceedings, but found compliance deficiencies. This is an important power of the federal government that will soon be up again for a vote, and you have not declassified that opinion. Senators Cotton and Warner, Republican and Democrat leads on intelligence, in April wrote the administration saying that they expected declassification of this March opinion within 2 weeks, yet it remains classified. You have a bipartisan request from the leadership of Intel. Will you declassify it or make it available to us?
We'll continue to look at that. I agree with you that that's a very important issue, and we need 702 reauthorized.
Thank you. Last question, if I could. The Safer Supervision Act is co-sponsored by Senators Lee, Cornyn, Tillis, and Langford, and it gives a path forward to making sure that federal probation and parole is more effective. We've discussed it before. Will you meet with me to talk about ways that this important criminal justice reform, supported by federal law enforcement, could move forward?
I think that
Please give a short answer to that.
I think it's yes, absolutely. I very much agree with what you're trying to do there, Senator.
Thank you.
What started as a routine confirmation hearing quickly turned into one of the most revealing exchanges about the future of the Justice Department. Senator Chris Coons wasn't simply asking Todd Blanche about legal qualifications. His central question was much bigger. Can someone who spent years serving as Donald Trump's personal defense attorney truly act as an independent attorney general for the American people? From the opening moments, Coons established the standard he intended to measure throughout the hearing. He acknowledged Blanche's legal experience, but argued that qualifications alone are not enough. In his view, the real test is whether the nation's top law enforcement official can make decisions independent of political pressure, even when those decisions involve the president who appointed him. The first major flashpoint centered on the January 6 pardons. Coons asked how many people had been convicted of assaulting law enforcement officers during the Capitol attack. Blanche underestimated the number before being corrected that it was more than 200. Coons then highlighted that all January 6 defendants had either received pardons or sentence commutations from President Trump. This wasn't just about numbers. Coons connected the issue directly to the Capitol police officers protecting the hearing room, arguing that pardoning individuals convicted of assaulting police sent the wrong message to law enforcement. Blanche responded differently. He emphasized that the president was exercising a constitutional pardon power and denied that he had been celebrating those decisions. However, Coons confronted him with earlier remarks from CPAC that appeared more supportive of the pardons, creating one of the hearing's most uncomfortable moments. The questioning then shifted from past events to constitutional principles. Coons asked whether Trump could legally seek another presidential term in 2028. Blanche answered clearly that he could not, citing the 22nd Amendment. It was one of the few moments where both men appeared to agree, especially since several other administration nominees had avoided giving such a direct answer. But the hearing returned to its central issue almost immediately: the independence of the Justice Department. Blanche acknowledged that the department is part of the executive branch and that any attorney general ultimately serves at the pleasure of the president. At the same time, he insisted he would uphold his oath to the Constitution and said he would resign rather than carry out an illegal or unethical order if such a situation ever arose. Coons remained skeptical. He questioned whether Blanche's previous role as Trump's personal lawyer could affect public confidence in the Justice Department's independence. The senator also pressed him over the controversial anti-weaponization fund and referenced a federal judge's criticism of Blanche's earlier testimony. Blanche rejected the judge's interpretation, maintained that the fund was no longer active, and argued that legal procedures, not a lack of transparency, explained why certain written declarations had not been filed. Transparency became another major theme. Coons challenged Blanche over classified legal opinions involving military operations and surveillance authorities, arguing that greater disclosure would strengthen public trust. Blanche countered that the department had already taken unprecedented steps to brief lawmakers, and maintained that existing legal processes governed what could and could not be released. By the end of the hearing, neither side had dramatically changed its position. Coons argued that the record raised legitimate questions about whether the Justice Department could remain independent under Blanche's leadership. Blanche, on the other hand, consistently maintained that he would follow the Constitution, provide honest legal advice to the president, and faithfully execute
execute the responsibilities of the office of confront. Ultimately, this hearing wasn't only